Okay, let's unpack this. Picture this. A stadium in Chicago, summer of 79.
Right. Comiskey Park.
Not for a game-winning homer, though, but for this. Well, this disco bonfire. Records piled high, literally ready to explode.
Disco Demolition night, yeah.
It really felt like the ultimate shutdown, you know?
Yeah.
A whole musical genre just going up in smoke.
It seemed that way on the surface.
But here's where it gets really interesting. From those very ashes, something completely unexpected sparked, like a global musical revolution.
What's fascinating there is how an event, seemingly designed to destroy, actually became a catalyst for creation.
Yeah.
It just highlights how cultural shifts, even the ones fueled by, well, negativity, can unintentionally clear the path for some really radical innovation.
Exactly. And that's the rabbit hole we're diving deep into today, the incredible evolution of Chicago dance music. We've got a fantastic collection of material here, tracing its journey right from those underground whispers after disco's public demise.
Through the clubs, the radio waves.
All right, through the city's electric clubs and influential radio, all the way up to its seismic impact on EDM, club music, dance music worldwide.
It's quite a story.
Think of this as your express ticket, you know, to getting seriously knowledgeable about this whole pivotal story without getting totally lost in the weeds. We're going to pull out the essential insights just for you.
And if we connect this to the bigger picture, we're really looking at a classic example of a subculture emerging from the fringes.
Totally.
And then eventually shaping the mainstream, leaving this lasting legacy on global culture. The story of Chicago dance music really encapsulates how so many musical genres take root and, well, flourish.
So where does this incredible story truly begin? It has to be in that immediate aftermath, right? When the disco lights went down so dramatically in Chicago.
Yeah.
Let's really delve into Disco Demolition Night itself. It wasn't just some, like, spontaneous act of disgruntled rock fans, was it?
No, not at all.
Yeah.
July 12th, 1979, at Comiskey Park, it saw this enormous turnout, officially almost 48,000, though likely way more crammed in, plus thousands outside.
Wow.
For a baseball doubleheader. And this very unusual promotion, for just 98 cents, you got in if you brought a disco record to be, well, destroyed between the gates.
Child.
This whole event was the brainchild of Steve Dahl, a rock radio DJ. He was definitely tapping into a growing wave of, let's say, anti-disco feeling.
And it wasn't just about musical preference, was it? Our sources really emphasize these deeper societal tensions at play.
That's such a critical layer to understand here. Disco had become really strongly identified with Black, Latin, and queer communities.
Right.
So the backlash against it was often perceived, and, with good reason, as being fueled by racism and homophobia. Nile Rodgers of Chic famously likened it to Nazi book burnings, which is intense. And there were these disturbing reports of people bringing funk and R&B records, music predominantly by Black artists, to be destroyed right alongside the disco LPs.
It's sobering to think about that level of hostility, just directed at a genre and by extension, the communities that embraced it.
Yeah.
However, the sources also point to a broader context, like disco's chart dominance might have been waning anyway, and rock radio definitely had a strategic angle in promoting alternatives.
There's definitely evidence suggesting that disco's peak chart performance was starting to dip a bit.
Okay.
And yes, rock radio stations absolutely had a clear self-interest in championing other genres. But Disco Demolition Night undeniably sped up disco's public downfall in the U.S., especially in Chicago.
Right. It was like the final nail.
Kind of. But what's fascinating is the resilience. It sparked this phoenix effect, if you will.
Yeah.
Where the rejection didn't actually extinguish the spirit of dance music.
No.
Instead, it sort of compelled its core communities to innovate, but underground.
Underground is the perfect word.
Yeah.
And that's where our narrative takes a really exciting turn, leading us to those now legendary clubs, the Warehouse and the Music Box.
Yes.
These weren't just places to dance. They fostered something much, much deeper.
Absolutely. In the void left by disco's mainstream decline, the Warehouse, which opened its doors in '77, became this essential sanctuary. Founded by Robert Williams, but it was Frankie Knuckles as the musical director who truly sculpted its groundbreaking sound.
The Godfather.
Pretty much. And the clientele was primarily Black and Latino, and significantly, a large part of the gay male community. It was a refuge, a space for belonging.
And Frankie Knuckles, he's almost a foundational figure in this whole story. What made his approach so unique, so influential?
Well, Knuckles had this incredibly broad musical palette.
Yeah.
A real genius for blending things seamlessly.
Yeah.
He'd weave together disco hits that were maybe fading from mainstream play, the soulful sounds of Philly soul, those lush Sal soul arrangements, harder to find R&B tracks, the new electronic sounds coming from Europe, Eurodisco Edelden Kraftwerk.
And Kraftwerk, right? I read that.
And even the stark futuristic rhythms of Kraftwerk.
Yeah.
As fresh disco releases became scarce, he ingeniously used reel-to-reel tape to re-edit existing tracks.
Ah, okay.
Extending the instrumental breaks that dancers loved, subtly shifting tempos, layering in extra percussion, sound effects. He famously described his work at the Warehouse as disco's revenge, taking that energy and spirit and just transforming it.
Disco's revenge. That's such a powerful image. And it's from the Warehouse that we get the name house music, right? Though there seem to be a couple of theories about that.
There are indeed. The most common theory is that house music just referred to the kind of music you'd hear at the Warehouse. Simple as that.
Makes sense.
But pioneers like Larry Heard have also suggested it could refer to music made in-house by the DJs themselves, using that new electronic tech that was becoming more available.
Interesting.
Both ideas really speak to the club's central role in the genre's birth, though.
And then picking up the energy in the early 80s came the Music Box. How did its atmosphere and sound differ from the Warehouse?
The Music Box, that emerged late '82 with Ron Hardy at the helm. He cultivated a very distinct energy.
How so?
While Knuckles was known for maybe a smoother, more consistent groove, Hardy was famous for this almost manic intensity, a much rawer, more experimental sound, and incredibly loud volumes.
Okay, so higher energy.
Definitely. His sets were this thrilling, sometimes chaotic blend of Philly disco classics, those coveted Italo disco imports, new wave sounds, and crucially, those early, often unpolished house productions that local producers would bring him.
Like demo tapes.
Exactly. Eager to see if their tracks would ignite his notoriously demanding dance floor. It was at the Music Box, where a track as groundbreaking as Future's acid tracks first just stunned people.
Wow. So these weren't just DJs playing records, they were actively reshaping the music, almost like the original remix artists.
Precisely. Using reel-to-reel editors and those early drum machines, the Roland TR-808 being key, they were fundamentally altering the music for their specific audiences.
Tailoring it.
Yeah, extending the parts that got the biggest reaction, adding their own rhythmic frameworks. They were true sound alchemists, really, prefiguring the whole remix culture we know today.
That's incredible.
And it's just crucial to remember the context. These clubs came from a deep need for safe, affirming spaces for marginalized communities. That palpable energy, that strong sense of community, it's baked into the music's DNA.
Right.
This was music created for and with this specific community.
And that vibrant community, in turn, fostered this explosion of incredibly innovative artists in the mid-1980s. Who are some of the essential names we should know from that early wave?
Okay, this is where the first true generation of house producers really emerges. Jesse Saunders, Vince Lawrence, Marshall Jefferson, Larry Heard, often recording as Mr. Fingers,
Mr. Fingers.
Chip E., Steve Silk Hurley, Farley Jackmaster Funk, and that groundbreaking collective future led by DJ Pierre.
Got it. And what were the defining sonic characteristics? What were the hallmarks of that early Chicago house sound?
Rhythm was absolutely central. That driving four-on-the-floor beat, usually programmed on those Roland drum machines, the TR-707, 808, 909, that became the signature.
The foundation.
Definitely. You'd also hear those syncopated offbeat hi-hats consistently, a sharp snare or clap on the second and fourth beats, and tempos generally, 120 to 130 BPM range.
And the jack, I've heard that term.
The jack. It's more than just a beat. It's a feeling, a rhythmic push and pull that just compels you to move in a specific way, almost a physical embodiment of the music's energy.
Okay.
Bass lines were often simple, synthesized, deeply hypnotic. And the Roland TB-303 synthesizer? That became iconic for its distinctive, squelchy, modulated sounds. Basically gave birth to acid house.
The 303.
Melody and harmony, often minimal. The focus was the groove. But you'd also get these incredibly soulful, often gospel-tinged vocals, especially female singers, the early divas of house.
Right.
And those now classic, distinctive piano riffs started appearing too. Production-wise, very much a DIY ethos, using relatively affordable electronic gear made primarily for club systems, not really for radio.
You mentioned some pivotal tracks earlier. Let's highlight a few of those foundational moments that really define the sound.
Absolutely. Jesse Saunders' On and On from '84, widely seen as the first commercially released house record, built on that raw TR-808 energy.
Okay, the first one.
Chippy's Jack Tracks EP in '85 really nailed that jacking feeling with tracks like It's House and Time to Jack. Self-explanatory, right?
Yeah.
Then Larry Heard, as Mr. Fingers, with the beautiful Mystery of Love and the incredibly influential Can You Feel It, that basically laid the groundwork for Deep House.
Deep House, got it.
And of course, Future's Acid Tracks in '87, revolutionary. That weird, otherworldly sound of the TB-303 was unlike anything before. Birth of a subgenre right there.
Acid House.
Farley Jack Master Funk's Love Can't Turn Around, featuring Daryl Pandy, was a massive early vocal. Marshall Jefferson's Move Your Body, that piano riff, instantly recognizable, a true house anthem.
Iconic.
Frankie Knuckles' Your Love with Jamie Principle, still utterly iconic, and Steve Silk-Hurley had early vocal success with Music is the Key and Sit Jack Your Body, which actually hit #1 in the UK.
Wow, UK #1 already.
Yeah, showing that international appeal this sound already had, even back then.
It's remarkable how this burst of creativity came from using relatively accessible tech. That rolling gear was absolutely key, wasn't it? The 808's boom, the 303's squelch.
Oh, it was absolutely critical. The relative affordability, the lower barrier to entry. You didn't need years of traditional music training or fancy studio gear.
Right.
It really empowered these marginalized communities who often had limited financial resources to create this genuinely groundbreaking music.
Yeah.
And what's so fascinating is how the quirks, the limitations of that early tech, like the TB-303's slightly weird sequencer,
Right.
were actually turned into defining, sought-after sonic characteristics.
Happy accidents, kind of.
Exactly. It was the birth of a completely new electronic, rhythm-centric musical language, where the raw groove and the dance floor energy were the main drivers.
And going back to those early clubs, it feels impossible to separate the music's evolution from the community that not only created it, but embraced it so wholeheartedly.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The connection between house music's origins and Chicago's Black and LGBTQ+ communities is absolutely inseparable. The Warehouse was way more than just a nightclub.
A sanctuary, you said.
It really was. A vital sanctuary during a time of significant social and political challenges. It provided this crucial space for community building, for uninhibited self-expression, a refuge from the very real racism and homophobia they face daily.
Mm-hmm.
And the music's uplifting themes, that incredible sense of communal unity on the dance floor, it perfectly mirrored this ethos of acceptance and liberation. It fostered what later became known universally as PLUR, peace, love, unity, respect.
ELUR, yeah.
For these communities, creating and dancing to house music back then was a powerful act.
Okay.
Cultural resistance, self-affirmation, reclaiming their voice and space after disco's public rejection.
Right.
Even that dynamic jacking dance style itself embodied that newfound freedom and unapologetic self-expression.
Okay, let's fast forward a bit. Late 1990s. Chicago's dance music landscape is changing again. Radio, especially B96, starts playing a much bigger role. What was happening on the airwaves then?
B96, yeah, WBBM-FM, had a really interesting evolution. Started as top 40, but steadily mixed in more dance through the 80s. By 1990, it was firmly the killer bee, B96, with a very dance-heavy, rhythmic CHR format.
Okay.
But in the late 90s, we see a subtle shift. Dance music was still important, but the station began adding more R&B and hip-hop, mirroring broader trends, really.
As the first house Eurodance wave maybe faded a bit from the top charts?
Exactly. By around 2000, the regular daytime playlist was significantly more hip-hop focused. Dance music got pushed mainly to those crucial, super influential weekend mix shows.
But during that late 90s period, B96 definitely had a huge impact, right? Bridging the underground and the mainstream in Chicago.
Oh, absolutely. B96 was this vital conduit, taking sounds bubbling up in the clubs and introducing them to a massive mainstream audience.
Yeah.
It popularized a diverse range of styles, house, techno, Latin freestyle, Eurodance, to a young, incredibly diverse audience. Different from, say, WBMX's more underground focus in the earlier 80s.
Yeah.
It really highlights that interesting dynamic between grassroots creativity and mainstream media exposure. Some might argue it diluted the underground essence.
Sure, the classic argument.
But there's absolutely no denying it created a whole new generation of dance music fans and significantly shaped local tastes. The station's eventual format shift also just reflected those larger ongoing shifts in the music industry and pop culture.
And those weekend mix shows on B96 were truly legendary, weren't they? Essential listening for so many people in Chicago.
Oh, they were the definitive sound of the Chicago weekend. Shows like the B96 Street Mix, compilations like Mix Master Throwdown, incredibly influential. They shaped how a huge audience understood and experienced club culture.
Yeah.
And the B96 Mix Masters themselves? They became genuine local celebrities, super talented DJs, tastemakers, breaking new sounds.
We have some of those key mix masters mentioned here. Let's give a shout out to some of those figures shaping the sound back then.
Definitely. Mix and Mark Stout, long-serving, hugely popular B96 DJ, known for energetic mixes, breaking new dance hits. He had that big Saturday night residency at Crowbar, too.
Crowbar, right. Legendary.
Alex Peace was a major force in Chicago hard house, also a respected DJ, producer, MC. While our sources don't list specific late 90s B96 shows for him, his deep involvement suggests a strong presence.
Oh, hey.
Bad Boy Bill, undeniably influential. Regular on B96, also WBMX, WGCI. Known for skillful house and electro mixing, he executive produced those essential B96 Mix Master Throwdown compilations.
Ah, okay.
Julian Jumpin' Perez, a true veteran from the original WBMX Hot Mix 5, also became a B96 Mix Master. Consistent presence with his mixes.
Wow, connecting back to the roots.
Yeah. And others like Bobby D with his Edit Crazy mixes, DJ Mark Gorski focusing on Eurodance, Tim Spin and Schamer, DJ Spin all contributing to that vibrant soundscape.
And what kind of music were they spinning? Sounds like a real melting pot.
It truly was. A real sonic blend of everything moving Chicago dance floors. You'd hear various house subgenres, classic Chicago, hard house, even acid throwbacks. Techno was definitely a staple, plus those massive Eurodance anthems dominating charts globally. Latin freestyle, hip house, and even the raw, high-energy sounds of booty bass or ghetto house.
Ghetto house, yeah.
You might hear international hits from, like, Real McCoy, Corona, Hadaway, LaBouche, played right next to local underground stuff from Cowsmere or DJ Funk.
So the club sound in Chicago late 90s was definitely evolving, more commercial in some ways, but still rooted in house energy.
Exactly. It was becoming more commercially attuned, definitely influenced by Eurodance popularity and more pop dance structures. More vocal-heavy house tracks gained traction alongside harder styles and hip house.
Those international anthems became staples.
Yeah, indicating a big influx of global hits into the local scene, played right alongside Chicago tracks. But simultaneously, those distinct regional sounds like ghetto house were increasingly finding their way into mixed shows.
So the underground was still innovating.
Very much so. It showed grassroots innovation was alive and kicking. The house music umbrella in the mainstream mind was definitely expanding beyond the early raw sounds to include broader, more radio-friendly dance music.
And there was that feedback loop you mentioned.
Yeah, clear feedback loop. Radio play led to wider acceptance, which spurred creation of more accessible tracks, hooks, vocals, radio-friendly structures.
Right.
This late 90s period was absolutely critical, both in commercialization and democratization of dance music. It effectively laid the groundwork for the much bigger American EDM explosion that was coming.
And Chicago DJs were right there, blending global trends with local sounds.
Right at the forefront, skillfully mixing those global trends with their own deep local sensibilities.
Okay, moving into the early 2000s. We start seeing the rise of rave culture in the U.S. and how it intersects with Chicago's established club scene. How did those two worlds start interacting?
Yeah, the global rave culture of the 90s, which really kicked off with UK acid house, it definitely landed in the U.S. by the turn of the millennium.
Big outdoor parties, warehouses.
Exactly. Large-scale events, often in unconventional spaces. All about immersion in electronic music, techno, house, trance, breakbeat, fostering that intense energy and community vibe.
And Chicago had its own version.
Chicago definitely had its own burgeoning rave scene then, but it hit some significant legal hurdles, especially with the Anti-Rave Ordinance passed May 17, 2000.
Ah, the ordinance. What did that do?
It made organizing those large unlicensed parties considerably riskier. Serious fines, legal trouble for organizers, venue owners, even DJs.
So that pushed the scene more underground. But it didn't disappear.
No, the underground spirit definitely persisted. You'd still find parties, more clandestine spots, warehouses, private homes, locations announced last minute, often word of mouth or early online channels.
Right.
There are even anecdotal accounts from back then of sort of informal understanding with some local police. They might monitor events, but not necessarily shut them down unless things got out of hand.
Interesting. Now, you mentioned Global Adrenaline and Another Level Productions. Were they big players then?
Those names certainly sound like the kind of promoters active in Chicago around the early 2000s. Putting on larger dance events.
Okay.
But our specific sources for this deep dive don't give verifiable details on their large-scale operations or specific event series under those names in that time frame. We do know about DJ Venom's Volume Productions from the mid-90s and James Olson's B3 Candy, which did large raves, though not just in Chicago.
Gotcha.
The overall picture of the Chicago rave scene, then, is present, active, especially underground techno, but maybe not as visibly massive as, say, the West Coast.
And with those legal hurdles for big underground raves, we started seeing this interesting merging of rave and traditional club cultures in Chicago.
Exactly. The increased difficulty of throwing those big, unsanctioned raves likely channeled some of that raw energy into the established licensed clubs.
Makes sense.
Clubs started booking DJs popular in the rave scene. Some rave promoters began using club spaces more legally secure.
So the music started blending too.
Yeah, the music reflected this convergence. DJs often played a wider mix house, techno, trance, breaks. You also saw rave aesthetics, multi-DJ lineups, focus on the overall experience, influencing traditional club nights.
Right.
This fusion was a really crucial step in broader EDM popularization in the U.S. It exposed clubgoers to sounds they might not have heard otherwise, while giving artists and promoters more stable platforms.
And Chicago's diverse venues in the early 2000s really mirrored this bridging of worlds, catering to different tastes.
Absolutely, a real spectrum. Crowbar Chicago was a renowned, high-profile club hosting major international DJs.
Yeah.
And Mix and Mark's residency there really linked radio and clubland.
Yeah, we mentioned Crowbar.
There's even a live Carl Cox recording from Crowbar in 2000 showcasing that techno house blend. Then Soundbar opened in '04 multi-level Eurostyle in River North.
Soundbar, okay.
Known for prominent touring progressive house techno DJs. Powerful sound system, strong residents. Peter Rauhofer played there early on.
And even bigger venues started getting involved.
Interestingly, yeah. Larger concert venues like the Aragon Ballroom and the Congress Theater started featuring electronic music events more often. A big indicator of growing appeal beyond nightclubs.
Oh, wow.
The Aragon hosted Kraftwerk way back in '75, and later acts like Zed's Dead. The Congress hosted Avicii in 2011, really foreshadowing the massive EDM boom.
Pre-boom sign.
Definitely. And all the while, a very active underground scene continued in smaller clubs, less conventional spaces for niche sounds, local artists, places like Podlazy Club for techno.
So you had this tiered ecosystem, big commercial clubs, underground spots.
Precisely. Large commercial clubs like Crowbar, Soundbar for broader audiences, international DJs playing polished house techno progressive, but then crucial dedicated underground bastions, and Smart Bar is the prime example.
Smart Bar.
Consistently championing deeper, less commercial sounds. Those historic venues like Aragon, Congress hosting major electronic acts, signaled growing commercial power, prefiguring the massive festival circuit.
And Smart Bar, it's almost legendary in Chicago house and techno history, right? And Derek Carter is so linked to it.
It absolutely is. Derek Carter, pivotal figure, deep roots in Chicago house since the 90s, globally renowned for innovative productions, amazing DJ skills, eclectic blend house, disco, soul, jazz, new wave.
Wow.
And his long-standing residency at Smart Bar is truly legendary. He's almost synonymous with the club.
And the club itself.
Smart Bar, established '82, consciously aimed to preserve that authentic, music-focused clubbing tradition of the warehouse, the power plant. Intentionally intimate, like 400 people, focused squarely on the dance floor, high-fidelity Function 1 sound, always inclusive. Frankie Knuckles was a resident until he passed. Derek Carter continued that legacy. That says a lot.
It really does.
And throughout the 2000s, as mainstream electronic music got more commercialized, Smart Bar steadfastly championed deeper, less commercial house and techno. Their famous policy, no dress code, no bottle service, no VIP, underscores their commitment to music and community.
Love that.
Always carefully balanced, iconic residents with respected underground DJs from around the world, staying true to their core sound.
So Smart Bar and Derek Carter were like vital guardians of that original Chicago spirit during a time of big change and commercialization.
They were crucial cultural anchors. In an era of fragmentation, commercial pressure, they provided a consistent, authentic space for less diluted house and techno to thrive.
Yeah.
Their commitment to sound quality, inclusive community, upholding those early values profoundly influenced later generations. Ensured foundational principles weren't lost during EDM's rise. Really shows the importance of dedicated spaces and influential residents for underground vitality.
Which brings us to that dynamic between the rising commercial tides and these enduring underground bastions in early 2000s Chicago. Was it symbiotic or more conflict?
The early 2000s Chicago scene really exemplified a complex mix, both tension and synergy. You had mainstream sounds pushed by commercial radio like B96 late 90s, larger commercial clubs catering to broader audiences.
Right.
Simultaneously, a very active, dedicated underground Smart Bar, DIY parties, smaller venues for niche tastes, in-house and techno.
And the Anti-Rave Ordinance.
That likely played a role. potentially channeled energy towards licensed clubs, while paradoxically also invigorating a more determined underground that valued its independence.
Interesting dynamic.
And the fact that an artist like Derek Carter, with significant international fame, could still maintain such strong underground ties via Smart Bar shows a level of fluidity, mutual influence between these strata. This period in Chicago was crucial, set the stage for the larger-scale mainstream underground dialogue of the national EDM boom that followed. While massive commercialization was still a few years off, the groundwork was being laid.
And Chicago artists and sounds kept influencing globally, even as the local scene navigated commercial versus underground.
Absolutely. Continued global influence. The coexistence of large commercial venues hosting big names and dedicated underground spots like Smart Bar showed diverse access points, diverse expressions of electronic music culture in the city. This coexistence, while sometimes tense, ultimately enriched Chicago's musical landscape and prefigured the multifaceted nature of the global EDM phenomenon about to unfold.
Then comes the 2010s, and suddenly electronic dance music just seems to explode across America. How did those early seeds planted in Chicago finally go national and get so huge?
Yeah, the early 2000s laid some groundwork, but the real explosion into the American mainstream happened in the next decade. A key piece of legislation shaping the landscape was the Illicit Drug Anti-Proliferation Act of 2003, the RV Act, originally from Senator Joe Biden.
RV Act, right, aimed at drug use at events.
Exactly, particularly MDMA at large dance events.
And how did that impact the scene?
It imposed strict liability on promoters, venue owners for drug use at their events, created a significant chilling effect. Hesitation to provide harm reduction water, chill-out rooms, medical support for fear of being seen as facilitating drug use.
Ooh, yeah.
The RV Act is widely seen as contributing to the decline of the grassroots underground rave model in many areas. Increased legal risks pushed events towards regulated commercial venues and the emerging large-scale festival circuit. Easier to control, secure.
So it kind of inadvertently steered things towards a more commercial path?
In a way, yeah. Steered electronic music towards a more formalized, commercialized trajectory. Helped pave the way for the branded EDM festival boom that followed.
So as underground raves faced pressure, we saw the rise of these bigger organized events. The U.S. was a bit late to the mega festival game compared to Europe, but the 2000s saw some real pioneers emerge.
That's right. Europe had a long history. U.S. was slower on the massive commercial scale, outside regional underground scenes. But 2010 saw key festivals emerge that became American EDM cornerstones.
Like what?
Detroit Electronic Music Festival, later Movement, launched 2000. Huge for celebrating Detroit techno origins. Early iterations drew large crowds, featured Detroit pioneers as directors, performers, emphasized the city's heritage.
Detroit.
Ultra Music Festival, founded Miami '99, started one day on South Beach, quickly grew, moved to Bayfront Park 2001, expanded duration lineup. By mid-2000s, Premier Destination Festival, diverse EDM trance, house, techno. Cornerstone of Miami Music Week.
Ultra, yeah, huge.
Electric Daisy Carnival, EDC. Insomniac took over 97, Roots in early 90s, SoCal Underground. Grew substantially in 2000s. 2010 LA event had safety concerns, death, led to Vegas relocation in 2011. Pioneered those large-scale, carnival-themed rave-style festivals. Massive growth.
EDC in Vegas, right.
And we should mention Coachella, launched 99, and Lollapalooza revived 03 in Chicago since 05. Multi-genre fests with increasing electronic presence, dedicated stages like Coachella Sahara Tent, Lola's Perry Stage, crucial for broader U.S. acceptance.
Daft Punk at Coachella 06.
Exactly. Iconic. Often cited as a pivotal moment for mainstreaming electronic music in the U.S.
So these pioneering festivals, despite hurdles, showed a growing American appetite for these big electronic music experiences.
Absolutely. They adapted the European model, multi-stages, international DJs, while cultivating a unique, often more spectacle-driven U.S. festival culture.
And the RV Act might have pushed things that way.
Possibly, yeah. By making unsanctioned raves riskier, it likely indirectly channeled energy and investment to these formal, controllable, commercial festivals. These events became crucial platforms for established stars and a rising generation of American electronic talent.
And then came the full-on EDM boom of the early 2010s. What really fueled that unprecedented explosion in popularity, commercial success in the U.S.?
Several key factors converged around 2010. The synergy between EDM and mainstream pop was huge. Pop stars collaborating with EDM producers Gadassia, Rihanna, Calvin Harris, brought electronic sounds to global radio, charts.
Right, pop crossovers.
Continued explosion of festival culture was critical. Megafests like EDC in Vegas, Ultra in Miami, influence of Tomorrowland launching Tomorrowland US in 2013.
Yeah.
Events became massive multi-day spectacles, elaborate production, hundreds of thousands attending.
The scale was just immense.
Daft Punk 06 Coachella, as we said, a tipping point. Also, increasing accessibility of production tools, democratization of music creation, affordable, powerful DAWs like Ableton Live, FL Studio, Logic Pro X, proliferation of affordable VST plugins, empowered bedroom producers.
Technology enabling creativity.
Massively. And finally, online platforms like SoundCloud, YouTube, crucial for discovery, dissemination, artists bypassing gatekeepers, building global fan bases directly.
And amid this EDM boom, how much of Chicago's foundational influence was still there, even if maybe not always obvious?
Oh, Chicago's contributions were deeply embedded, even if many listeners weren't aware of the direct line. Core genres, house, techno, born in Chicago, were the bedrock for countless later popular EDM subgenres.
Our roots.
The DJ-centric culture started in intimate Chicago clubs, elevating DJs as central performers that got magnified to a global stadium scale. Superstar DJs headlining festivals.
Yeah.
Even Chicago's earlier engagement with mainstream dance radio like B96, the larger club venues, prefigured aspects of the EDM boom's commercialization.
The blueprint was there.
Exactly. While dominant boom sounds big room house, anthemic progressive house, electro house, early mainstream dubstep often repackaged those original sounds into more commercial, festival-optimized formats. The underlying rhythmic, structural DNA often traced back to Chicago's innovations.
So while the EDM boom was global, influenced by many things, the spark and core elements often trace back to Chicago's early scene.
Absolutely. The U.S. EDM boom, while globally influenced, was also distinctly American marketing, branding, mass consumption. The term EDM itself was heavily promoted to rebrand American rave culture for a wider audience.
Right.
And while Chicago and Detroit provided foundational material, the boom era often remixed these sounds into more palatable, drop-heavy festival formats. It's also worth noting this period, marking peak commercial penetration in the U.S., drew critiques, artistic homogenization, lack of diversity sometimes, detachment from deeper cultural roots.
Yeah, those criticisms were definitely there. But even with those shifts, the lasting impact of Chicago's early innovations on U.S. dance music is undeniable.
Undeniable. Chicago's contribution is way beyond just birthing house music. It created an enduring blueprint for much of U.S. and global dance music culture today.
How so?
Specific impacts. Genre lineage, house music's 44 rhythm, production techniques, sampling, 808s, 909s, synths, became integral to countless later EDM subgenres.
Right. The building blocks.
The DJ, as artist elevation from record selector to central performer, pioneered by Knuckles, Hardy in Chicago, became defining for broader EDM culture. DJs as global superstars. Culture of inclusivity. While commercial EDM faced diversity criticisms, house music's roots in Chicago's Black and LGBTQ+ communities established a philosophical foundation. Dance music as a space for community, freedom, acceptance, the PLUR ethos origin.
That original spirit.
And democratization of music production, the DIY spirit of early Chicago producers with accessible tech, directly prefigured the bedroom producer phenomenon, fueling the volume and diversity of music during the boom. So, conclusion, Chicago didn't just invent a genre, it forged a cultural and technical framework. Methods of creation, modes of experience, channels of dissemination set crucial precedents. Even as EDM evolves, its fundamental DNA often traces back to Chicago's pioneering innovations. Chicago's impact is truly foundational to all modern dance music.
And that brings us right up to the 21st century, the ever-evolving beat. It feels like the landscape now is more diverse, maybe more fragmented than ever.
It really has. The 21st century saw this unprecedented acceleration and evolution, diversification of electronic music. Building on those rich foundations, we've seen an incredible proliferation of subgenres, fascinating cross-pollination between styles, a dynamic interplay between global and local traditions.
Our sources dive into some key developments since 2000. It's almost overwhelming how many distinct styles have emerged.
It truly is a vast, constantly expanding sonic world. Within techno, diversification into minimal, industrial, dub techno, J-techno, harder techno, Berlin solidifying as a global hub. Trance branched out, progressive, uplifting, the diverse world of psytrance. Goa, Dark Sea, full-on progressive psyche, tech trance, vocal trance.
So many trance types.
Drum and bass continued evolving, liquid funk, neurofunk jump up, tech step, dark step, intelligent atmospheric DB, halftime, drum step.
Okay.
The broader bass music continuum gave us various dubstep forms, UK versus Brostep, UK garage and its offspring like grime and UKG revivals, grime itself.
Bass music keeps shifting.
And house music, of course, continues its endless metamorphosis. Thriving scenes in deep house, tech house, progressive, classic versus mainstage, electro house and its substyles, big room, complextro, Dutch, fidget, Melbourne bounce, plus newer stuff like future house, bass house.
Wow, house is still branching out like crazy. And it's not just Western genres anymore, right? Globalization via the internet has really opened things up.
Absolutely. Incredibly vibrant, innovative scenes emerging globally. Amapiano, Gcom from South Africa, massive popularity locally and internationally. Kuduro from Angola, influencing global sounds. Latin America's rich landscape. Techno-cumbia, cumbia-tronica, Cango electronico, Bale funk carioca from Brazil, tropical bass, moonbottom, neo-folklore fusions.
So much happening there.
Even fascinating regional styles gaining recognition. Balani Show from Mali, Shangan Electro from South Africa, Arabic, Middle Eastern electronica, tons of exciting stuff from East Asia, Japan, South Korea, China.
Yeah.
The internet's been a powerful catalyst. Global exchange, widespread adoption of sounds, but also vibrant localizations, hybridizations, makes electronic music this remarkably flexible framework for diverse cultural expression.
And technology continues to be this absolutely crucial engine driving all this change and innovation.
Indisputably, 21st century electronic music evolution is inseparable from rapid tech advancements. Democratization of production, powerful, accessible DAWs like Ableton Live, Revolutionary Session View, FL Studio, Logic Pro X, putting studio power into bedroom producers' hands.
Right, Ableton changed things.
Proliferation of versatile, affordable VST plugins like Native Instruments Massive, and its huge impact on dubstep's wobble bass dramatically expanded sonic palettes.
Yeah, Massive was everywhere.
The shift from ownership to access via streaming, Spotify, Apple Music, their algorithmic influence on discovery, profoundly altered distribution and consumption. SoundCloud remained vital for emerging artists' direct sharing, feedback, A&R.
SoundCloud's role was huge.
Social media platforms like TikTok emerged as incredibly powerful viral hitmakers via short video algorithms. Instagram, YouTube essential for branding, visuals, fan engagement, live streaming, DJ sets, festivals, expanding global reach.
TikTok's influence is undeniable now.
Even live events evolve. Sophisticated immersive visuals, lighting, lasers, LEDs, pyro, emerging VRR for virtual attendance, interactive experiences. These techs aren't passive tools. They actively shape creative practices, accelerate genre evolution.
It's a feedback loop.
Exactly. Didois influence composition. Software synths create signature sounds. TikTok influences song structures. New tech enables new sounds, drives further tech innovation, constantly accelerating genre mutation, overall soundscape evolution.
And in the post-EDM boom landscape, say after 2016, it feels even more fluid, a mix of looking forward and looking back.
Very accurate observation. Post-peak EDM boom is characterized by diversification, resurgence of classic sounds, greater genre fluidity, exploring new tech frontiers.
So less dominance by one sound.
Yeah, decline in overarching big room dominance on main stages. Likely oversaturation, desire for diverse experiences. Interestingly, alongside this, renewed appreciation for foundational genres like house, techno, a sentimental rave aesthetic evoking the 90s.
Nostalgia cycle.
But fascinatingly, there's even a prediction of a big room house comeback around 2024-25, fueled by nostalgia, sample platform data, some artists releasing old-school soundtracks. Perhaps the biggest trend is increased genre fluidity, hybridization. Artists boldly blending disparate styles. Hyperpop, funk, amapiano crossovers, jazz-infused club, Latin reggaeton fusions with EDM trap, lo-fi funk blending with synthwave, predicted to continue strongly into 2025.
Constant mixing and matching.
We're also seeing a notable rise in faster tempos, harder styles, hard techno booming, hitting main stages, hardcore gabber thriving in dedicated scenes, drum and bass resurgence, especially in the US.
Faster, harder sounds getting popular again.
Artificial intelligence is rapidly emerging as potentially transformative in production. AI tools assisting or generating melodies, harmonies, beats, sound design, mixing, mastering. Opportunities for creativity, accessibility, but raises questions of authorship, originality.
AI is the big unknown.
Finally, the influence of the Global South is increasingly profound. Sound artists from Africa, Amapiano, Afro House, Grequam, Latin America gaining significant traction globally, achieving crossover success, influencing global tastes.
So it feels like this dynamic tension, revisiting older sounds, but also this accelerated push into new hybrid territories fueled by tech and the internet.
Exactly. Decline of a single dominant mainstream sound created a more diverse, fragmented landscape. Digital platforms like TikTok are powerful accelerants for new trends. Simultaneous rise of hard-fast genres alongside slower experimental sounds suggest diversification of tastes into more specialized communities, desire for a broader range of experiences.
And the live music experience festivals, clubs also shifted significantly, especially after the pandemic.
Well, the pandemic caused unprecedented disruption, cancellations, closures, but followed by a resilient resurgence with adaptations.
How so?
Strong return to live events, but the pandemic forced pivots to virtual formats, live streams, Twitch, YouTube. These continue in hybrid forms, offering global accessibility.
Right, the hybrid model.
Amplified demand for more than just DJs.
Yeah.
Audiences want elaborate, immersive experiences, visuals, art installations, interactive elements, thematic coherence.
The experience is key.
Rise in popularity of boutique, niche festivals, catering to specialized tastes, fostering community feel, focusing on specific subgenre fans over massive commercial events.
Smaller, more curated events.
Sustainability, social consciousness becoming more important, eco-friendly practices at events, artist promoters using platforms for social political issues, events incorporating activism, fundraising.
More conscious consumption.
Within club culture, potential shift in Gen Z preferences away from traditional alcohol-centric clubbing towards themed experiential events. Economic pressures unfortunately led to some small club closures. But prediction is, while super clubs might morph, smaller, curated underground spaces with strong residents, community focus, deep commitment to music, maybe no phones, secret lineups are poised to thrive.
So these shifts reflect a move towards the experience economy. Quality, community, unique setting, ethics matter more.
Exactly. Especially for younger generations prioritizing authenticity, meaningful engagement. The pandemic might have accelerated a move from passive consumption towards more active, engaged participation in curated, meaningful live electronic music experiences.
So bringing this incredible journey full circle, we've gone from Chicago's defiant underground birth after disco, through its pivotal club and radio eras, to its massive global impact today. And right at the heart, that fundamental sonic and cultural blueprint of Chicago House.
Absolutely. We've touched on disco Demolition Night's impact, the warehouse and music box's foundational roles, early innovators and their signature sounds, B96's mainstreaming efforts late 90s, rave and club culture intersecting early 2000s.
Chicago's enduring underground spirit smart bar, Derek Carter.
The national EBM boom, where Chicago's seeds went global, and finally this incredibly diverse, fluid, tech-driven 21st century landscape with all its global influences.
It's truly amazing. The legacy of those early Chicago pioneers still resonates so powerfully in the DNA of contemporary dance music worldwide. Their innovations sparked a global movement that just keeps evolving.
Yeah.
And that fundamental tension, underground authenticity versus mainstream appeal first navigated in Chicago, it remains central to the ongoing story of electronic dance music, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. This deep dive really underscores that the story is far from over. For those of you who found this exploration intriguing, trust me, there is a vast, ever-expanding universe of electronic music history and current innovation just waiting to be discovered.
The beat goes on.
In countless fascinating and unexpected directions.